Hello, everyone. Good evening. Sorry, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Yetunde.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So we're going to start ASAP without further ado. So I'm welcoming everyone to today's webinar on on the psychology of design. And our amazing guest speaker is already here, and is no other person than Daniel Kingston Andrew, and is going to be taking us.
That's the problem now. Even LLC self
Sorry, apologies about that. So it's going to be taking us through the power of understanding user psyche to craft captivating experiences that resonate and inspire. And this is a great opportunity actually to learn from someone who is very vast in this skill. So I want you guys to join me to welcome Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Super, super excited to be here. Thank you, ProDev. Thank you, Tunde, for giving me this awesome opportunity to share my knowledge with you guys. Okay. Yeah, Tunde, please, can you also make me a host so I can share my
Okay.
screen? Yeah.
All right.
All right. Welcome again, everyone, to this call. Today we'll be talking about the psychology of design and how you can best understand user behaviors to yeah, and how you can best understand user behavior to improve your product design. Um, is there a way to mute all? Okay, okay, great. I think I'll just mute all. Okay, yes. And so first, I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Daniel Kingston Andrew, and I'm a product designer with Meltwater. Basically, so at Meltwater, I just focus on building out and managing all the design systems and the components. And also, I currently lead the Friends of Figma Abuja community, where we tend to help designers grow too. And so today we're talking about the psychology of design, right? So let's just dive in deep. We were already 6 minutes into the call, so so in today's talk, right, I would like us to explore how we could benefit from insights on psychology and how we could use that to enhance, right, our designs and basically just understand users' behavior that would help improve our designs. I think people are supposed to join on mute. I don't know why it's by default is allowing them to. It's kind of distracting. Uh, so so first, right, I would like to start with some key concepts, right, that's going to like introduce you to the psychology of design and the behavioral aspect of design. The first one is like the user-centered design, right? So this concept basically just revolves around putting the user in the center of your designs, right? So those design decisions you're going to make, those design choices you're going to make, they should be basic decisions that are coined around or that are gotten from the feedback that you've gotten from your users, right? So what this means is they should be data-driven, right? You should design based on the user's need, based on the user's preference. Everything about the design, right, is going to revolve around the users, right? So that's the concept of the user-centered design. This method of design allows you to closely align your product, right, to the needs of the users, right? And when you build products this way, they become very, very usable, and then you can benefit a whole lot as a business also, right? The second one would be cognitive psychology, right? So this is basically just understanding how people perceive, think, and make decisions. This is very, very, very crucial in design, right? If you can understand as a business, okay, how people think, how people perceive your brand, and how people make decisions on your applications, on your website. I mean, there are tools that can help you get all these insights, right? One of the major tools I use to do this is called Full Story. Full Story is a tool that you can use in post-production. So, for example, if you launch a web application and you want to get great insights from the application, you can incorporate Full Story to that, right? So, all this understanding how your users think, how they perceive your product, and how they make decisions is something that's going to give you an edge, right? In the industry, not just as a product designer, but also for like your business and the brand you're building for. And the third one would be behavioral economy, right? So this just simply means like you're exploring the psychology and the factors that influence the decision making. So for example, mostly let me use an e-commerce product for example, right? When you visit Jumia's website and you have four products, right? So you see users, most majority of your users clicking on product A, right? What could be the reason? Why are users always clicking on product A? Could it be because of price? Could it be because of the product categories? You understand? So there could be like a lot of reasons why users are clicking on product A. And right, and it's your job as a designer to kind of like understand and get these statistics, right? That's why we get to like incorporate a lot of all these insight tools to our website that gives us insight to say, okay, this is the reason why these users are always clicking on product A. All right. So if you try to understand like the behavioral psychology, the reasons why the things that influence your users to make some certain decisions, right? That would also give you a big edge as a product designer when building out for products, right? And then the last one would be emotional design. This is basically just like leveraging emotions to create impactful user experience, right? So you're basically just leveraging on the emotions of the users, right? To create designs that resonate with the user, right? I'm going to give us some examples of this when we get to the later part of the talk. But I'm just trying to like introduce you to the key concept. Like, so the key concept you should put in mind is like user-centered design, cognitive psychology, behavioral economy, and emotional design, right? And then the next part would be understanding user behavior, right? So this is like the big part of the whole psychology thing, right? Because psychology is about behavior, like how people behave, how people think, how people perceive things, and their understanding. So when you try to like understand this user's behavior, to give you like deep insight on how to make those decisions. So the first thing we want to look at here will be perception, right? How users interpret and make sense of design elements. So the perception is very, very important because perception is the way a user sees or interprets a particular design element. For example, if I have a button, my primary button is black with a white text, right? Maybe with a height of probably 56 on the side. When a user visits that site, right? The 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 button, how is the button appealing to the users? What's the perception of the user to that button? Do you think that the button is convincing enough for them to click to carry the actions that is intended, right? So perception is a very, very great thing, right? So as designers, one thing we should always do is to like try to put ourselves in the shoes of the users, right? Which is perception, trying to like understand or see how the user interpret and make sense of all the design elements, the colors, the fonts, um, basically everything that brings together the design, right? How does this user like interpret? What is the perception of the brand or the website or the design element to the users, which is very, very important. Perception is very important. The second one is connection, right? So this is like the mental processes involving understanding and interacting with your product, right? You've heard about cognitive load, which just simply refers to the the amount of elements or the amount of processes or functions that the user needs to keep in mind while carrying a particular task on your website, right? And as designers, one thing we should always try to do is to reduce the cognitive load for users. And one way we can do that is by reducing the amount of choices the users have to make, right? So you've seen where decision paralysis, right? Because of they have a lot of things, a lot of decisions to make, right? And that kind of further slows the ability of the users to make decisions and think quickly. You understand? So the cognitive load on your website, it's very, very, very important, right? When you're designing something, you should try to like balance the cognitive load of this particular website. How would the users perceive this website? Are they able to clearly make a decision? Like, okay, for example, if you're building a landing page, right? Every section should be targeted at doing something, right? Introducing a feature and then give a call to action. So when you look at that section, is it clear enough for the users to understand and take the primary action that you want that is intended for that particular section, right? Which is like the cognitive load, how users can to like understand the mental load of how users see your website or perceive your application, right? The last one, the third one, sorry, will be motivation. So motivation, this is just like trying to like uncover what drives the users to engage with your product, right? Or also what drives the users to abandon the product. So motivation is basically like sentiment, right? This could be positive or negative, right? Negative in the sense that the users get to abandon the product. Positive in the sense that the users get to proceed by clicking on the CTA or the intended action or completing a particular task that was intended, right? So the motivation is very, very, very important, right? What is the motivation? So if let me use Airbnb for example. If I want to, so I'm visiting a new city, probably Kigali in Rwanda, and I need to like book an apartment. That is my motivation, right? I need a place that I want to stay for a 2 weeks conference when visiting Kigali. So that's like my motivation. So when as a user, right, as a designer, so you should try to understand the motivation of the users because that's like the primary thing why they want to, and try to build in line of the user's motivation. Because if you, when you do this, it makes it really easy for the users to kind of like relate to your design and like understand what you're trying to convey, right? The last one is emotion. I already mentioned that in the previous slide. It's just recognizing the role of emotion in shaping users' preference and action, which is very, very, very important. Like the emotions, how the users like get to like see what the users feel when they are using your product. Do they feel happy? Do they feel calm? Do they feel safe, right? Or like do they trust your brand when they're using? So like what emotion does your brand or application convey, right, when users interact with it? And these are very, very, very important um behaviors to understand from your users. This will help you to build like a better product that's more that would relate more to the user and would also this in return will just translate to building a better product for both the users and the business you're building for, right? Because if your users are comfortable using your product, that's going to like that's going to like translate to better revenue for the company. You understand, right? So I would also like to like point out some design principles, right? So I would say there are a lot of design principles, right? But I think I picked out four very important ones that I think you should know about, right? The first is the Gestalt principle, right? So this is just like helping you to understand how the users perceive visual elements as a unified whole, right? So, for example, this principle just like tells us the importance of hierarchy, the importance of spacing, right? Those elements, like how you, for example, you can see this design, right? The top part has this net and is separated by this white space at the center. This design principle is separated by this white space at the center before you see the footer, right? So this principle just like tells you like how the users perceive visual element as they are grouped or as they are unified as a whole, right? So when you also build, you need to keep this in mind in terms of how you intend to use your space, how you intend to combine your colors, your fonts, and the hierarchy itself, you understand, to create distinctions, right? When you're building, this principle is what like focuses on like what you should do more when you're building. And then I think the second one will be Hicks law, right? So Hicks law just simply refers to the time it takes to make a decision increases with the number of complexity of choices, right? Remember I talked about decision paralysis. So for example, if if you want users to make a decision and then you have three options, it's easier for the users to pick from the three options than picking from 15 options, right? So in some cases, flexibility, right? We need to control the amount of flexibility we add to our designs. So you want the user to be able to pick from 10, but is it really necessary when your users could just pick from just three basic options, right? So reducing the number of choices, right, that a user has to make is in turn going to reduce the complexity of those choices, right? So if I have three options to pick from, it's on like on the complexity scale, it's very, very simple compared to having 10 options to picking from. I don't know if you understand, right? So the complexity is very, very important. So when you're making those design decisions, right, you want to also put this Hicks law in mind that says that the time it takes to make a decision drastically increases, by the number and the complexity of the choices that the user has to make. So when designing, you have to keep these laws in mind, right? So the fewer decisions you allow the users to make for a particular screen, a particular flow, aids them to make those decisions quicker, And then the next principle will be Fitts law, right? The Fitts law just states that the time to acquire a target is a function of distance and the size of the target, right? So for example, if you're building a landing page, yeah, and you have a very, 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 very small to very, very small button as a call to action button, right? The amount of time it's going to take for the user to click on that button, right, would be determined by the distance and the size of that target, right? So if you have a bigger button on your screen, so for example, users are likely to click a 40x or a 56x or 80px button than comparing to clicking a 16 or 8px button, which is very, 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 very small. Do you understand? So when you're designing, you need to also put Fitts law in mind, right? That the distance of the element and the size of the element, right? It's very, very, very crucial, right? That's what Fischler is trying to point out. Fischler is trying to point out that the time, right, that is going to take to acquire a target, right, is directly proportional to the distance, right, and the size of the target. So when you're building out your designs, you should also keep this law in mind, right? So that's what Fischler is trying to tell us. And then we also have the Miller's law, right? The Miller's law just states that the average person can only keep 7 plus or minus 2 items in their memory. So remember we talked about like the cognitive load, right? So the cognitive load also you like the cognitive load is also kind of like related to this Miller's law, right? So when you're designing, right, you want users to keep less things in mind because if you start allowing the users to keep a whole lot of if the users need to remember more than 7 things to be able to like perform a particular action, then that function becomes very, very that particular task becomes very, very difficult for the users to carry out the action, right? So when working, you need to like keep this in mind, okay? When you're building out a flow, right, you need to like structure your flow or structure a particular task in a way that your users do not need to keep, right? I would say average of 5 is okay, right? Because here you see that the Miller's law says an average of 7, right? Plus or minus 2, which is like 5, right? They can only keep these items in mind when working, right? And when you try to exceed this, users will need to like go back to say, okay, I need to understand what's happening here. And in that way, the purpose of the UX of the entire platform you're building for has already been defeated. If a user has to go back 3 flows to remember the option he has to select for the particular flow is on, then the UX of that app or that website is already flawed. And I would also like to like point out some case studies, right? So some key good case studies when it comes to like psychology of designs and brands that understand this. The first one is Apple. I mean, you can see how Apple uses like major design principles to resonate with their user psychology. If you visit the Apple website, for example, there's something that's very, very different. Like you can see this website with the Vision Pro. You can see how clean and how minimalistic this website is, right? The only thing on your mind here when you're looking at the lady wearing this Vision Pro. And this is intentional, right? Because the Apple, they've understood that, okay, the fewer things you have on your screen, right, increases the user's like attention span, right, to what you are trying to point out to them. So you can see on their screen, because this is very clean. They just have the lady wearing the Vision Pro, and then they have 2 calls to actions, right? You can learn more about the Vision Pro, and then you can buy. And notice how they put the buy option second instead of putting it first, right? So they're just indirectly telling you that they're actually interested in you buying, but they're trying to tell you that they want you to know more about the product you're buying. So that means they put more priority for the users first, right? So there are a lot of smaller details that go into this design that when you look at it, you know that okay, Apple really understands how to use the psychology of design to kind of like sell their design and create trust in their brand, right? If you notice the second header here that just shows iPhone 15 Pro Max, like before the fold, so they're just trying to tell you, okay, this is the second product we want you to actually pay attention to. And when you scroll to that section, you get to see more about like the iPhone and all like that. So they try to like break every sections into like a single task, right? So that way it's easier for the users to make decision and I kind of like understand what's going on and makes which in turn, sorry, makes it very, very easy for the users to make their decisions, right? The second case study would be Airbnb, right? You can see how Airbnb utilizes emotional design to foster trust and connection. So, like I was saying, right? So, look at the Airbnb's website, right? And there are a lot of features on the Airbnb platform that that was built to foster trust, right? Such as showing the host pictures, showing the host ratings, showing reviews, right? So when you look at this website, you notice how they have like the rating after the name. So the rating just kind of like boosts the what's it called again? The user's confidence or trust to probably like booking a particular flat or whatever option you want to go with, right? So Airbnb try to like utilize emotional design to build trust, right? So for the business model Airbnb is operating, right, in the hospitality industry, right? Trust is a very, very crucial thing for all brand, especially for a business like Airbnb, right? Trust is really, really, really important because you're leaving your place, you're going to somebody else's house that is a host, right? So you need to at least have some level of trust for the platform and also the host to be able to make such decisions, right? And because they've been able to crack this, right, what that means is in return, it means more sales, more conversion for the business. You understand, right? So Airbnb also, they've been able to tap the emotional part, right, of the psychology of design to kind of like improve their sales, right, and build trust between their users. And the last example I have here is Amazon, right? Watch out Amazon, they've been able to, over time, right? They've explored and used behavioral economics to like drive purchasing decisions. If you log into your Amazon account, if you use Amazon, you notice how the first page, the product that appear there are tailored to your need, right? This and this landing page is built based on various factor, right? Based on the top performing products, based on your search history, you understand, based on your purchase history, based on a lot of things, right? So they track all these things, right? Which means that in return, like tracking the user behavior, right? And then they kind of like combine all these factors to make their website more seamless in terms of like the product suggestions and the kind of things they bring to your timeline, to which in return would actually like increase the sale of the product. I don't know if you visited an e-commerce website before. You had the idea of buying Maybe you had the idea of buying a new mouse. And then when you visited the website, because you saw that Amazon was advertising this new mouse with a keyboard, and then the price difference is not very far from what you had as a budget, you are willing to like increase your budget to secure the mouse and the keyboard combo, right? So if you look at things like that, you see how this psychology, right? The psychology of a team, how the behavioral part of users tend to like sometimes you make some decisions, right? Or you see this product like they try to they've built their product in such a way that they can convince you to buy more, right? Because they've built with trust in mind and they've also built with you in mind, right? They've provided some of the things that you don't really know that you want, but when you just see them happen, you're like, oh, and it makes it really easy for you. So in return, right, they satisfy your need as a user, and in return, they get more sales, they get more conversions, right? So also like you've been one okay, we've heard about psychology of design, we've heard about laws, we've seen use cases. Now, how do I apply this psychology to, or how do I apply everything I've learned to my own design as a designer? I'll say the first one is user research, right? You have to conduct user research to kind of like understand your user's need and preference, understand the pain point, right? You also have to, user research is very wide, you could do the competitive research to understand more about your competitors, do user research. You can do the quality. You can either decide to go with qualitative or quantitative, depending on what you're building for, right? So you can do all these tests to just basically understand your users, understand their needs, understand the pain point, understand your users' preference. When you can understand all this data, like when you're able to get all this, right? It'll help you to understand how your users start thinking, which is like the behavioral part of what we've been talking about, right? So user research is one of the most famous way to get that, right? So it's only through user research that you can know, okay, this is how the users behave. And user research comes in different form. There's user research where you get to do before building the actual product, and then also there's an like the insight part where you get to like understand the user's behavior by interacting with your product. This happens post launch, right? So you start by doing your research to understand the user's need and pain points. You go live, right? And then you can also like implement tools like Full Story or other research tools like Hotjar to kind of like understand how the users use this product, right? Which is also part of the user research. And this is what's going to like give you insight to say, okay, from users 1 to 50, I think I have 50 users going this direction. I have 50 users getting blockers in this screen. I have 50 users having or XYZ amount of users having decision paralysis on this screen, right? So getting all those information from the user research will help you tailor your designs, right? To fit the need of the designers of the users more, right? And the next one will be prototyping and testing. I mean, like, this part cannot be overemphasized. Like, as a designer, if you build your product and you don't test, then that means you just build the product for yourself, to be honest, right? Because I see a lot of fancy designs and all. And then how you just know that these designs were not tested is because if they were tested, they would have known that these things were not actually very, very usable, right? Users will always give feedback, right? And it's now left for you to test. And the only way you can get this feedback is when you test, right? You need to like test your designs. And then I would like to also mention that you need to keep your mind open, right? As a designer, you need to keep your mind open in getting feedback, right? Because this is the only way. And have this mentality that design is not a one-time process, right? You can constantly improve this design. You can constantly improve a particular flow, right? By constantly testing with new users to get more feedback. You get right? So just keep in mind that design is an iterative process, right? And changes will always come based on because also remember that users' needs are not fixed, right? Users needs also grow and change. And your product should be able to accommodate that, right? And the only way you can know that is when you test those products and get quality feedbacks. And the next one will be A/B testing, right? So A/B testing is something that I use frequently in my place of work because when you're building enterprise application, then you discover that A/B testing is very, very, very important, right? When you want to test, maybe you have two flows for a particular task, and then you want to test flow A and flow B to see which one works better for the users, right? So A/B testing is very, very important too in understanding the psychology of your users, right? So instead of providing one option, you can provide two options and say, okay, this particular batch of users get to see flow A, batch B get to see flow B, and then you get feedback from both users, and then you either know if you want to go with flow A or flow B, or if you want to like merge different aspect of flow A and flow B to make like a holistic experience based on the user's feedback you've gotten from the A/B testing, right? So A/B testing is also like a key way to find out. It's also like a key practical way to like understand your users and then test your designs. And then the I think I already mentioned this, which is like iterative design, continuous improvement. I always tell people that keep your mind open in design, right? Always seek for new and positive feedback, right? So I see a lot of designers when they want to get feedback. Yes, it's good to get feedback from your fellow designers, right? But also, please do not underestimate the feedback you get from the actual users. Yes, your fellow designer can tell you, oh, I think this is nice, this element is this. But to some extent, those are assumptions, unless they're actually users for that product. But then if they're not users for the product, they're just assumption. That's why you need to always test with your users, right? And when you test with your users, if you're someone that always wants to test with new users to get feedback, then you get to see that okay, there's always room for improvement, right? So continuous improvement is a way to continuously understand your users, right? As their behavior change, as their behavioral pattern change, as the users grow, and then a lot of change, you get to like understand because you're always testing to improve your product, right? And then in conclusion, right, I'll say by integrating insight, right, from psychology into our design process, we can create products that actually resonates with user on a deeper level, right? So if you actually work with the data, which is like the insight that you get from your users, like if you incorporate that into your design process, into your design, right? At the end of the day, you'll be able to build a product that would resonate with the user on a deeper level. And you see users always coming back to your product and they don't know why. I mean, for everybody on this call, I'm sure there's one app you are addicted to, right? Whether the addiction is a good one or not, but the fact that you're addicted to that app, that means that those apps, they've been able to, the designers that worked on it, they've been able to like understand what you need, understand your psychology and how you think, right? And then they'll be able to build to fit your need. And that's why you're always going back there, right? You don't, sometimes you cannot really point why you always go back there, but some way, somehow, some way, the app just works for you, and then you're always going back there, right? And then also like understanding user behavior would empower us to anticipate their needs, right? And address pain points, which will ultimately deliver an exceptional experience for the users, right? So if you understand how the users think, right, this will empower you to understand, okay, this, because you already understand how the users think, it will help you to understand their needs and also their pain points, right? Which in return will help you to build an exceptional experience for the user, right? And then the benefits of this for the particular brand is very, very enormous. I mean, if you can deliver an exceptional experience to your users, you've you basically like solved like I think almost 50% of the problem for your brand, right? Because you always have these users hooked in on your platform, and what that means is more revenue for the business, more conversion for the business, right? And the last I would like to say, let's continue to explore fascinating, right, intersection of psychology and design to craft meaningful and impactful products, right? So when you're building, always try to like think what is in the mind of your users, right? And the only way to clear out those assumptions is to test, you understand, interview your users, ask questions, right? So always keep that in mind that you want to understand your users, you want to understand their need, you want to understand how they think, and that is like the only way to build meaningful and impactful products, you know. And then thank you. You can follow me on all social media at Techie Munch, and I'd like to hand over to Yetunde. I know some of us have questions, so we can go into the questions part.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is a webinar on the psychology of design, and our speaker is no other person than Daniel Kingston Andrew. And this is me saying thank you so much for such an enlightening section. I've learned, I'm not a product designer, but with the little knowledge of design that I have, I think this is going to help me as well. So if you have any question, please kindly signify or drop your question in the chat box. I have a little bit of question myself, so do you mind me throwing them at you, Daniel?
Sure, sure. Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you so much. So the first question is, are there any ethical considerations that designers should keep in mind when applying this, insights, especially to product design?
Yes, of course. I would say like basically just keeping in mind the basic design principle when building, right? So
Okay.
first, when you understand the user's need, you understand the user pain points, and then you understand the user's behavior towards a particular product or accomplishing a particular task, probably by studying your competitors, right?
Okay.
One thing you should also do is to basically now merge them with the basic design principles. So when you're building, you should build with hierarchy in mind, right? And you should also uh basically, right, there are a lot of design elements that you can combine together to achieve an awesome design, right? The first one is, I would say, it's good having good hierarchy on your website or your application, right? Like the Miller's law say that breaks your content into section, right? Having a clear call to action for every stage of a design, right? So for every flow, for every stage, for every particular action you want the user to carry, the action should be very clear and concise, right? So they don't need to think about the action. If they need to think about the action in the first place, then something is wrong with the design, right? So you want to make the actions very, very clear as possible, right? So that's like one way to.
Okay, thank you so much. Um, all right, another question is, how can designers effectively gather and analyze user feedback, to inform their design decisions?
Okay, please can you repeat your questions again?
Um, okay. I said, how can designers, someone like you, obviously, how can you gather and analyze, user feedback? If, for example, let's say you are tasked with creating a, a website interface
Mm-hmm.
for a brand. So how do
Mm.
you get feedback? You need to gather information and then analyze that data before you go ahead to say, okay, I want to start working on this design. So how do you effectively gather that kind of information?
Okay, like I said, I would say that there are a lot of ways to get users feedback, right? And I mentioned the qualitative and the quantitative, right? So qualitative basically just involves holding users interview. So this could be online sessions or in-person interviews, right? Or you could as well use the quantitative, which is more like sending out surveys or sending out polls to get like feedback. So there's no linear way per se, depending on the project structure and what you're trying to test for, or or what the particular data you are looking for, right? So there are a lot of ways you can test that. I mean, so depending on what works for you for your particular use case, right? Like some when you're trying to get some data, it's better you go with what's it called again? The qualitative. While in some cases, right, the quantitative would be better. So I would say this is not like a one-way thing. It's not like a linear process. So it depends on your use case, right? So you could either decide to go with the qualitative or the quantitative method, or you could even go with both in some cases, right? Depending on what you're testing for.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so someone dropped a question in the chat box and they said, Abiola Oluwatosin said, the principles of design stated need to be applied while designing physical products.
Okay, you're breaking a bit. Let me just read the questions from the chat. I have a question. The principle of design stated can be applied when designing physical products. I mean, yes, some of those principles can also be applied when designing physical products because the behavior of the way human thinks when interacting with digital products and interacting with physical products, I would say they are different, but the differences are not that much. So obviously there are some of these principles that can be applied when building physical products. Yes. So I just saw another questions. What are some effective strategies for creating emotional connection through design? This is a very awesome question, right? So, what are some effective strategies for creating emotional connection through design? So, the first thing you would want to look at is what kind of connections do you want to build with your users, right? In the first place, so you want to see, okay, do I want to build trust, right? What kind of emotions do I want to invoke? So when users visit my website, do I want them to be happy? Do I want them to be calm? Do I want my brand to come across as trustworthy? Do I want my brand to come across as so depending on what you're trying to achieve, right? There are a lot of ways you can achieve that, right? From colors. I mean, color is one of like the a major factor, right? From your color to your typography style to the spacing to even the what's it called again, the brand tone, the way you write out your copies, the tone you're trying to portray to the users. When you combine all these elements together, right, they are the one that then form the experience or the emotions you're trying to invoke to your users. So if you're trying to, maybe you're a corporate brand and you're trying to invoke trust, right? We all know why most corporate brands use blue, because blue is a color that kind of like invokes trust and just signifies that corporate brand stuff, right? And you'd want to use more, and also even in terms of like typography, the when you visit the website that is built with sans serif and when you visit the website that is built with sand fonts, right? They evoke different emotions, right? So depending on what you're trying to achieve, right, you can combine different elements like colors, typography, and I think a major part that most companies are beginning to use these days is, I think, the UX, the writing, right? The UX part of it, the UX writing, the copy. That's also like a major way to evoke emotion. And I don't know if that answered your question, Messi.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Messi said, thank you. Okay, so another question from my end is that how do cultural differences impact user behavior, and how can designers account for these differences in their designs?
Okay, so uh, can you go over the questions again?
Okay, how do cultural differences impact user behavior, and how can designers account for these differences in their designs?
So I would say cultural behavior affects designs in so many ways, right? So for example, we have like a lot of cultural norms, right? And value that influences preference of users and expectation, right? So for example, let me think of a very easy example. Uh okay, so when you go to Chicken Republic to buy rice, you discover that for probably age 9 to 15 or 16, when they're buying the rice, Chicken Republic, they provide the option of either they provide you with soda, could be Fanta, could be Coke, could be whatever, or they provide you with water. You discover that most children, right, within the age of 9 to 15, they will most likely go with soda. Depending on any brand you want to, they will might go soda than taking water. Now that's because that's like a cultural norm in this part of Nigeria. Like a lot of children consume soda, right? So you can see how cultural norm affects design. And that's why when you're building out designs for specific region, right, some of the decisions you make, right, will be informed by this cultural norm. Okay, so I think that also like affects a big part, and also it's like you're trying to build you're building an app and then you're integrating NFT payments into it, which is not very common in this part of the world, right? So if you're having that, if you're going to include that in your app, that means you are basically not even considering your users, right? So that's one way. And I think one of the ways users can actually keep that in mind is to conduct localized user experience. So for example, if you work with a global brand like Paystack that operates in different country, right? What you can do is you can conduct localized research, right? So you can conduct a localized research for Nigeria and a different one from Ghana, right? Because your users in Nigeria have slightly different, right? So when you keep these things in mind, right, it helps you to conduct localized researches that now gives you insight to say, okay, this region of the people using my application from this region, they want XYZ from the app. The people using it from this region, they want XYZ from the app. And that's why when you visit some applications, you discover that they have slightly different experience, right? For different region. When you visit app like Adobe, they try to tell you to select your region, right? Because the experience for people in this region is different from the experience from people in another region, right? So that's how like um cultural differences affect users' behavior. And also, one of the ways you can actually keep that in mind is to conduct localized research.
All right, thank you so much, Daniel. That was amazing. Okay, so the last question from my end is what advice would you give to designers who are just starting to explore the intersection of psychology and design? What do you want
Mm,
them to take note of? And when you're just starting out with a skill, trying to test the waters in design, or just breaking out into tech, there are so many things that you just overlook, and these are crucial things. And I think what we discussed today is definitely a part of it. So what advice would you give to people who are just starting out, or people who are trying to explore the basis of design? What advice would you give to them to make them thrive, in
So
this part?
yeah, I would say the first advice is to continuously educate yourself, right? Not just only on the psychology and principles and how to apply them, but just educate yourself about design in general, right? I try to see design as a very fast-paced industry, right? And if you have that kind of mindset, that would push you to learn more. That would push you to learn more new things because trends, we see how new design trends come up every time. I'm not saying you should ride on trends, but I mean you should always keep yourself updated, right? Because now you see the trend, the general trend now is AI. And you can see how a lot of companies are trying to incorporate AI to their applications, their businesses, to make life easy for users. So I think you should continuously educate yourself, right? On these principles guiding design and psychological principles. This would actually like improve your designs greatly. And the second one is probably to like experiment, right? Experiment with insight you've gotten, right? So when you do those research and you get those data, don't just get those data because you want to use them for your case studies. Apply the decisions, apply the insight you've gotten from that data to your design, right? And see how much you begin to grow as a designer, right? Apply those insights. I know some of us will do research, but at the end of the day, we don't use this research. We just do research because we want to show the statistics. Oh, I did this research or during my design process. You don't want to be that designer, please. Be the designer that actually does the research, get the insight, and then apply those insights to the design process. And then also, I would say collaborate, right? Collaborate with a lot of designers, right? And not just designers, to collaborate with project managers, collaborate with developers. I mean, like work with different people in the tech team. This will actually like broaden your knowledge and give you like a better perspective of what you're building because you get to see the product from everybody's perspective, right? I remember like there was a talk I talked about having empathy, not just for your users, but also for your developers and your co-workers. So I think when you collaborate with designers and other techies, right, it will generally improve your knowledge and your level of design. And the last one will be to stay curious and open-minded, right? So if you're always curious and open-minded, ask questions, you discover that your growth pace would be unstoppable because you're always hungry for new things. You want to learn new things, you want to know new things, and you're always open-minded to take feedback, right? So I think I would say those are like the four things I would want to mention that would make you grow as a designer.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniel. Um, in fact, I think this has been an awesome session. I've really learned a lot myself. I think every one of you too. I can also say the same for you. So, at this point, I think it's time to end the webinar. But before I do, I want to thank you all for joining us today. It's really been an insightful section filled with valuable discussions and shared experiences. And as we come to the end of our webinar, even though I'm very sure and confident that we're going to be partnering with Daniel again very soon. So I encourage you all to continue exploring, continue learning, and implementing the strategies and insights that Daniel has shared today. And remember that growth is a journey, and we're here to support each other every step of the way. So let's keep the conversation going and stay connected. So until next time, I'll say take care and keep innovating. So if you want to reach out to any one of us, you can reach out to Daniel on LinkedIn, and you can also reach out to anyone from the Products team. Products is here to help every tech talent strive in their career and in the workspace. And we look forward to seeing more of this very soon. So thank you all for joining. Have an amazing
Yeah,
and have an amazing
yeah.
week.
Thank you all for joining. I would share my slide.